An HOA president demanded I remove my premature baby's life-saving feeding tube from the park, calling it disturbing and unsightly. When I refused to leave, she did the unthinkable, she grabbed it and yanked. Blood poured from my daughter's face as her screams pierced the air. Then karma struck hard. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The afternoon sun blazed mercilessly over the Riverside Meadows Community Park, casting harsh shadows across the playground where young mothers gathered with their children. Among them sat 23-year-old Emma Martinez, her hands trembling slightly as she carefully adjusted the feeding tube connected to her 3-month-old daughter, Lily. Lily had been born premature at just 28 weeks, weighing barely 2 pounds. Her tiny body had fought for survival in the NICU for 2 agonizing months. The feeding tube was her lifeline, a delicate medical device that delivered the nutrition her underdeveloped digestive system couldn't yet process on its own. Every day was a battle, every feeding a careful procedure that Emma had learned through countless sleepless nights and tearful training sessions with nurses who had become like family. Emma's eyes were shadowed with exhaustion, dark circles speaking of nights spent monitoring her baby's breathing, checking the feeding pump every 2 hours, praying that tomorrow would bring improvement. Her clothes hung loosely on her frame, she had forgotten to eat again, too consumed with caring for Lily to remember her own needs. Her once bright eyes had dimmed with worry, but when she looked at her daughter, they still sparkled with fierce, protective love. "It's okay, sweet girl," Emma whispered, her voice cracking with emotion as she checked the connection point on Lily's tiny nose. The tube was taped carefully to her baby's cheek, a constant reminder of how fragile life could be. "Mommy's got you. You're doing so good, so brave. My little warrior princess." Lily's big brown eyes looked up at her mother with complete trust, her small fingers wrapped around Emma's thumb with surprising strength. Despite everything, the hospital stays, the 3 surgeries, the endless medical appointments, the seizure that had terrified them all 2 weeks ago, this tiny human had fought her way into the world, and Emma would do anything to protect her. The park was relatively quiet that Thursday afternoon. Most children were still in school, leaving only the youngest ones and their caregivers. Emma had specifically chosen this time, hoping to avoid crowds, to give Lily some fresh air without too much stimulation. The doctors had said fresh air and gentle sunlight would be good for Lily's development, would help strengthen her immune system that had been compromised by her premature birth. Emma had been coming to this park for 2 weeks now, slowly building up Lily's tolerance to the outside world. At first, they'd only stayed for 15 minutes. Now they could manage almost an hour before Lily became overstimulated and fussy. It was progress, small, precious progress that Emma celebrated with her whole heart. She didn't notice the woman approaching until a shadow fell across her bench, blocking the warm sunlight that had been gently kissing Lily's face. "Excuse me," a sharp voice cut through Emma's peaceful moment like a knife. Emma looked up to see a woman in her late 50s, dressed in an expensive white tennis outfit with a designer logo prominently displayed. Her highlighted blonde hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail that stretched her face tight. A laminated badge hung around her neck, Linda Whitmore, HOA president. Her lips were pressed into a thin, disapproving line, and her eyes, cold, calculating eyes, fixed on Lily with undisguised disgust. Emma had seen her before, stalking through the neighborhood with a clipboard, measuring grass heights with a ruler, photographing cars parked 2 inches over property lines, sending violation notices for the slightest infractions. She'd heard the stories from other residents. Linda had made an elderly widow cry over a garden gnome, had threatened to fine a family whose child drew hopscotch squares with chalk, had tried to ban a veteran service dog from the common areas. Everyone in Riverside Meadows knew Linda Whitmore, and most people feared her petty tyranny. "Yes," Emma replied politely, though something in Linda's stance made her instinctively hold Lily closer, her maternal instinct sensing danger like an animal sensing a predator. "What is that?" Linda demanded, pointing at Lily's feeding tube with barely concealed disgust, her finger jabbing toward the baby's face like an accusation, like Lily was some kind of offensive object rather than a precious human child. Emma's stomach tightened, a familiar knot of anxiety forming. She'd dealt with stares before, with uncomfortable questions from curious strangers, but something about Linda's tone set off alarm bells in her head. It's a feeding tube. My daughter has a medical condition. I don't care what it is, Linda interrupted, her voice rising sharply, cutting through the peaceful afternoon like broken glass. This is a family park. We have community standards. You can't bring medical equipment out here where children can see it. It's disturbing. It's unsightly. Parents shouldn't have to explain such things to their innocent children. Emma's mouth fell open in shock. Her heart began pounding, adrenaline flooding her system, preparing her body for fight or flight. Disturbing? She's a baby. She needs this to eat. She needs this to live. There are other mothers here, Linda continued, gesturing broadly at the nearly empty park where only 2 other families sat at distant benches, minding their own business. They shouldn't have to explain such things to their children. It's inappropriate. It's making people uncomfortable. Several residents have complained to me about seeing you here with that thing. Emma felt heat rising in her chest, a mixture of humiliation and protective fury. Her hands began to shake. My daughter has every right to be here. She needs fresh air and sunlight just like any other baby. She's not hurting anyone. She's just existing. Linda's eyes narrowed dangerously, her face hardening into a mask of entitled rage. I am the HOA president of this community. I've held this position for 12 years. We have rules about maintaining the aesthetic and comfortable environment of our common areas. This, she jabbed her finger toward Lily again, closer this time, so close that Emma flinched, is not acceptable. It's not what people pay premium HOA fees to see. She's 3 months old, Emma's voice shook with barely contained anger, with disbelief that this was actually happening. She spent 2 months in the hospital fighting for her life. She coded twice. Twice, I watched doctors perform CPR on my newborn baby. Twice, I thought I was going to lose her. This tube is keeping her alive. How dare you call my daughter inappropriate? How dare you say she doesn't belong here? Other mothers in the park had started to notice the confrontation, sensing the rising tension in Linda's voice. A young woman with twins in a double stroller moved closer, her expression concerned, sensing the escalating danger. An elderly grandmother on a nearby bench stopped pushing her granddaughter on the swing, watching the scene unfold with growing alarm. A father playing catch with his son paused, ball in hand, turning to watch, instinctively knowing something wrong was happening. I don't have time for your sob story, Linda snapped, her voice dripping with contempt, with cruel dismissal. Every parent thinks their child is special. Every parent makes excuses. But we have standards in this community. Standards that make Riverside Meadows the premier neighborhood in this city. If your child can't meet those standards, maybe you should consider whether this is the right place for you to live. Maybe you should consider moving somewhere more appropriate for your situation. Emma stood up abruptly, carefully securing Lily against her chest with one arm while gathering her diaper bag with the other. Her whole body trembled with rage and hurt. Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them fall, refused to give this horrible woman the satisfaction. We have every legal right to be here. We pay the same HOA fees as everyone else. My daughter is not violating any legitimate rule. Don't you dare talk back to me. Linda's voice reached a screech that made several children in the park stop playing and stare, their innocent faces confused and frightened. Her face flushed an angry red, veins standing out on her neck. I have the authority to enforce community standards, and I'm telling you to leave. Right now. Pack up your things and get out of this park. Emma's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She had dealt with stares, with uncomfortable questions, with people who didn't understand Lily's condition. She'd even had a few insensitive comments from strangers who didn't know better. But this was something else. This was pure malice, pure cruelty directed at an innocent baby who had already suffered so much in her short life. No, Emma said firmly, though her whole body shook and tears threatened to spill from her eyes. We're not leaving. We're not doing anything wrong. My daughter deserves to be here just as much as any other child. She has the same rights as every other human being. Linda's face flushed an even uglier shade of red, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. You entitled little, you think you can just disregard the rules because your child is sick? You think that gives you special privileges? I'm tired of people like you thinking the world should revolve around your problems. The woman stepped forward aggressively, invading Emma's space, her face inches from Emma's. Emma could smell her expensive perfume mixed with the sour scent of rage, could see the hatred burning in her eyes. Emma instinctively turned to shield Lily, her maternal instinct screaming danger, but Linda's hand shot out faster than Emma could react. What happened next occurred in horrifying slow motion, each second stretching into an eternity of terror that would haunt Emma's nightmares for years to come. Linda grabbed at the feeding tube, her fingers wrapping around the clear plastic line with shocking aggression, with deliberate violence. If you won't remove this monstrosity, I will. I'm done negotiating with you. No. Emma screamed, trying to twist away, trying to protect her baby, but Linda's grip was surprisingly strong, fueled by rage and years of unchecked entitlement and power. Linda yanked hard, putting her full strength into the pull, her face twisted with determination and anger. The tube disconnected with a sickening pop that Emma would hear in her nightmares for years to come, a sound that would wake her in the middle of the night in cold sweats. The connector piece tore away from the port in Lily's nose with brutal force, ripping delicate tissue that had barely healed from the initial placement. Blood immediately began streaming down the baby's face from the traumatized nasal passage, bright red against her pale skin, so much blood from such a tiny face. Lily's scream pierced the air, a sound of pure pain and terror that no mother should ever have to hear from her infant. It was a primal sound, a sound of agony that cut through Emma's soul like a knife, that made every mother in the park instinctively reach for their own children. Emma's world shattered into a million pieces. Lily. Oh God, Lily. No, no, no. Emma's hands shook violently as she tried to assess the damage while her daughter shrieked in agony, her little body convulsing. Blood covered Lily's tiny face, mixing with tears, soaking into Emma's shirt, warm and wet and terrifying. The baby's whole body convulsed with the force of her screams, her little arms flailing helplessly. The feeding tube hung uselessly from Emma's diaper bag, the sterile connection point contaminated, useless, the carefully maintained medical line destroyed. Formula dripped onto the ground, the pump alarm beeping frantically, a mechanical scream joining Lily's human one, creating a symphony of horror. What have you done? Emma sobbed, trying to apply pressure to Lily's nose with trembling fingers while supporting her daughter's thrashing body. Blood kept flowing, so much blood from such a small face. What have you done? She could die. Do you understand? She could die. Linda stood frozen for a moment, the feeding tube still clutched in her hand like a trophy of her cruelty, her expression shifting from righteous anger to dawning horror as she realized what she had done. The blood draining from the baby's face, the mother's anguished screams, the growing crowd of witnesses, it all suddenly registered in her mind. This wasn't a victory. This was a crime. The young mother with twins had already pulled out her phone, dialing 911 with shaking fingers, her own face pale with shock. Yes, I need an ambulance at Riverside Meadows Park immediately. A woman just ripped a baby's feeding tube out. The baby is bleeding badly, there's blood everywhere, the mother is hysterical, please hurry. The elderly grandmother had her phone out too, recording everything with surprisingly steady hands, years of experience making her calm in crisis. I got it all on video, she called out loudly, making sure Linda heard, making sure the horrible woman knew she would face consequences. Every word, every threat, every action. The whole assault. I got it all. You're going to prison. I didn't, I was trying to, Linda stammered, backing away, finally dropping the feeding tube onto the ground where it lay in the dirt, contaminated and useless. Her hands shook as the reality of her actions crashed over her like a tidal wave. She was being difficult. I was just trying to enforce the rules. She wouldn't listen. You assaulted an infant. The mother with twins shouted, stepping between Linda and Emma, positioning herself as a physical barrier, protecting the wounded baby and her traumatized mother. Don't you dare come near them again. Someone stop her from leaving. Emma couldn't focus on any of it. Her entire world had narrowed to Lily's agonized crying, the blood that wouldn't stop flowing, the fear that Linda had caused internal damage to her daughter's already fragile nasal passages and esophagus. What if she'd damaged the stomach port? What if she'd caused internal bleeding that they couldn't see? What if Lily stopped breathing? What if this was the thing that finally broke her precious baby's will to survive? Shoo, baby, shoo, Emma wept, rocking Lily gently, trying to calm her while her own panic threatened to overwhelm her, to drag her under into darkness. Mommy's here, Mommy's got you. Help is coming, sweetheart. Just hold on. Please hold on. Please don't leave me. You're so strong. You fought so hard. Don't give up now. Lily's cries had taken on a quality that made Emma's blood run cold, breathless, desperate gasps between screams, like she couldn't get enough air. The trauma to her nose was affecting her breathing. Her lips were starting to turn slightly blue, that terrible color that Emma had seen too many times in the NICU, the color that meant oxygen levels were dropping. Please, Emma begged no one in particular, her tears falling onto Lily's blood-stained face. Please, someone help my baby. She can't breathe right. Please. She's turning blue. A middle-aged man in jogging clothes appeared, slightly out of breath from running over. I'm a nurse, he said quickly, authority and confidence in his voice. He knelt beside Emma. Let me help. I work in pediatric emergency at Memorial Hospital. He pulled out a clean handkerchief from his pocket, gently tilting Lily's head back to help stop the bleeding and open her airway. The bleeding needs to stop, and we need to make sure her airway stays clear. Has she had any other injuries? Any other tubes or ports that might have been damaged? I don't know, Emma sobbed, her voice breaking into pieces. I don't know if she damaged anything else when she pulled. Oh God, what if she's hurt the internal placement? What if she's damaged her esophagus pulling on it like that? What if there's internal bleeding? Lily's so fragile, she's only been out of the NICU for 4 weeks. The nurse's expression was grim as he assessed Lily's condition with professional efficiency. The ambulance will be here soon. Try to keep her as calm as possible. Talk to her. Let her hear your voice. Babies respond to their mother's voice even in distress. Linda had backed away toward the parking lot, clearly trying to escape the scene of her crime, but the grandmother and 2 other mothers had moved to block her path, forming a human barrier of righteous anger. You're not going anywhere, the grandmother said firmly, her phone still recording, capturing Linda's every movement, every expression. The police are coming too. You're going to face what you've done. This is ridiculous, Linda tried to regain her authoritative tone, but her voice shook and her hands trembled visibly. I barely touched the child. She's overreacting. This is assault on me, look at all of you surrounding me, threatening me. I'm the victim here. I'll have all of you arrested. You assaulted a baby, another mother shouted, joining the group surrounding Linda, preventing her escape. Several other park visitors had gathered, creating a wall of witnesses. You should be in prison. You could have killed her. She's premature, someone else yelled. Look how tiny she is. What kind of monster attacks a sick baby? Within minutes that felt like hours, sirens filled the air. 2 police cars and an ambulance screamed into the park, emergency responders jumping out before the vehicles had fully stopped, running toward the scene with their equipment. My baby, Emma gasped as paramedics rushed over with their equipment bags and stretcher. She's premature, she was born at 28 weeks, she has a feeding tube disorder, she has digestive issues, the tube was ripped out violently, there's so much blood. We've got her, Mama, a female paramedic said calmly but urgently, her professional demeanor reassuring even in the chaos. She gently took Lily from Emma's arms and placed her on a small stretcher designed for infants. What's her name? Lily. Lily Rose Martinez. She's 3 months old but she was 8 weeks premature. She has a gastrostomy tube too in her stomach, but that wasn't touched. Just the nasogastric tube was ripped out. She has chronic lung disease. She has reflux. She's on medication. Emma couldn't finish as another sob overwhelmed her. She rattled off Lily's medications from memory while the paramedics worked quickly, efficiently, cleaning Lily's face with gentle precision, examining the damage, checking her vital signs, oxygen levels, heart rate. Oxygen saturation is at 89%, one paramedic called out to his partner. We need oxygen now. They placed a small oxygen mask over Lily's face, and Emma watched helplessly as her daughter continued to cry, her small chest heaving with effort, working so hard just to breathe. 2 police officers approached the group of mothers surrounding Linda, who was now sitting on a bench, her head in her hands, her expensive tennis outfit stained with Lily's blood on her hands. What happened here? The senior officer, a stern-looking man with gray at his temples, asked the crowd. At least 6 voices started talking at once, all pointing at Linda, all describing what they'd witnessed, their words tumbling over each other in outrage and horror. The grandmother stepped forward with her phone. Officers, I have everything recorded, she said, her voice steady and clear despite her anger. Every threat, every word, and the actual assault. You can see her grab the tube and yank it out. You can hear the baby screaming. I have it all. The officer took her information, writing carefully in his notepad, while his younger partner approached Emma, who was trying to climb into the ambulance with Lily. Ma'am, I know this is incredibly difficult, but I need to get a statement from you, he said gently, his eyes full of sympathy. Emma nodded, wiping her eyes, trying to compose herself enough to speak clearly through her tears. That woman, she pointed at Linda with a shaking finger, she's the HOA president. She came up to me and started harassing me about my daughter's feeding tube. She said it was inappropriate, disturbing, that we shouldn't be here. She said my daughter didn't meet community standards. She said people had complained about seeing us. When I refused to leave, when I stood up for my daughter's right to be here, she grabbed the tube and ripped it out of my daughter's nose with force. She knew what it was. I told her exactly what it was and why my daughter needed it to survive. She didn't care. She said if I wouldn't remove it, she would. The officer's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching in his cheek, his expression hardening. Did she know it was a medical device? Did she know it was necessary for your daughter's survival? Yes. Yes. I told her everything. I explained that Lily was premature, that she needed the tube to eat, to live. I told her it was medical equipment. She didn't care. She called it a monstrosity. She said my daughter was making the park unsightly. Those were her exact words, unsightly. Like my baby is some kind of decoration that she doesn't approve of. The officer looked over at Linda, who had gone pale and was now talking rapidly to the senior officer, gesturing wildly, clearly trying to defend her actions, to spin some story that would save her. Then he looked back at Emma with barely concealed disgust. We'll need photographs of your daughter's injuries for evidence. The paramedics will document everything. We'll also need the damaged feeding tube as evidence. Can I go with her in the ambulance? Emma asked desperately, grabbing the officer's arm. Please, I need to be with her. She needs her mother. She's terrified. She's been through so much already. Of course. Absolutely. We'll get your preliminary statement and follow up at the hospital. Go be with your daughter. We have everything we need here. The female paramedic approached Emma, her expression serious. We need to transport now. Her vitals are stable enough for transport but we need to get her to the ER immediately. They'll need to assess the internal damage and replace the feeding tube with a sterile one under controlled conditions. The bleeding is slowing, but we're concerned about aspiration and infection. Emma climbed into the ambulance, her legs barely supporting her, holding Lily's tiny hand as the paramedics continued working, adjusting oxygen levels, checking monitors. Through the open door, she could hear the police officer speaking to Linda, his voice hard and official. "Linda Whitmore, you're under arrest for assault and battery of a minor, child endangerment, and destruction of medical equipment. We're also considering charges of aggravated assault given the victim's age and medical fragility." "This is absurd," Linda protested loudly, her voice rising to a hysterical shriek. "I'm a respected member of this community. I've been HOA president for 12 years. I was just enforcing community standards." She was the one being difficult. She refused to follow the rules. "I have rights. This is my neighborhood." "You have the right to remain silent," the officer continued, pulling out handcuffs, the metal glinting in the afternoon sun. "And ma'am, I strongly suggest you use it. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You can't arrest me. Do you know who I am? Do you know how much tax money I pay? I know the mayor. I know the police chief. This is harassment." Linda's voice reached a hysterical pitch as reality crashed down on her. As the ambulance doors closed, Emma caught one last glimpse of Linda Whitmore being led away in handcuffs, her hands secured behind her back, her face a mask of shock and indignation, while a crowd of mothers and their children watched with expressions of satisfaction and disgust. Some were clapping. Children pointed, asking their parents what was happening, why the mean lady was being taken away. The ride to Memorial Hospital was a blur of lights and sirens, of beeping monitors and worried voices. Emma held Lily's hand, murmuring constant reassurance even as her daughter's cries weakened into exhausted whimpers that were somehow even more heartbreaking than the screams. "You're so strong, baby girl," Emma whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. "The strongest little girl in the world. You've been through so much already. You fought so hard. We're almost there. The doctors will fix everything, I promise. Mommy promises. I won't let anything else hurt you. Never again." Her phone rang, vibrating against her leg. Marcus. Her husband. "Marcus," she sobbed into the phone, barely able to form words through her tears. "Something terrible happened. Someone attacked Lily. Someone ripped her feeding tube out at the park. We're in an ambulance. We're heading to Memorial Hospital." What? What?" Marcus's voice was thick with panic and rage, with disbelief. Who would, Emma, is she okay? Tell me she's okay. Tell me my baby girl is okay. I don't know yet. There's blood. So much blood, Marcus. And she can't breathe right. They have her on oxygen. We're almost at the hospital. Just get here. Please. I need you. Lily needs you. Please hurry. I'm leaving work right now. I'm running to my car. I'm coming. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Emma, his voice broke. Emma, our baby. I know. Just drive safe. We need you. Lily needs her daddy. 20 agonizing minutes later, as doctors and nurses swarmed around Lily in the emergency room, Marcus burst through the doors, his work shirt half untucked, his tie hanging loose, his face streaked with tears, his eyes wild with fear and desperate love. Where is she? Where's my daughter? Where's Lily? Emma fell into his arms, and they clung to each other desperately, two parents united in their worst nightmare, their bodies shaking with sobs, drawing strength from each other because they had to, because Lily needed them both to be strong. What happened? Marcus demanded, his voice rough with emotion. Tell me everything. Who did this to our baby? I'll kill them. I swear to God. Between gasping breaths, Emma told him everything: Linda's harassment, her cruel words, her escalating aggression, the assault itself, the terrible sound of Lily's screams that still echoed in her ears. Marcus's face transformed from fear to pure rage, his hands clenching into fists. "Where is she? Where is this woman? She's been arrested," Emma said quickly, gripping his arms, holding him back. "The police arrested her right there. There were witnesses. Video. They took her away in handcuffs. She's in jail. She's going to pay for what she did." A doctor emerged from the examination room, still wearing bloodied gloves, and they both rushed forward, nearly tripping over each other in their desperation. "Mr. and Mrs. Martinez," the doctor said carefully, his expression serious. He was an older man with kind eyes that had clearly seen too much suffering over the years. "I'm Dr. Patel. I've been treating Lily." "Is she?" Emma couldn't finish the question, terror choking her voice. "Lily is going to be okay," Dr. Patel said, and Emma's knees buckled with relief. Marcus caught her, holding her up, his own body shaking. "Thank God," Marcus breathed, his voice cracking. "Thank God. Thank you. Thank you." However, the doctor continued, his expression remaining grave, the damage was significant. The feeding tube was pulled out with considerable force. We estimate at least 15 to 20 pounds of force based on the tissue damage. This caused trauma to her nasal passage, tearing tissue, and damage to her upper esophagus. We found minor bleeding in the esophageal lining. We've had to place a new tube under sedation, and will need to monitor her closely for the next 72 hours for signs of infection, aspiration pneumonia, or further complications. Premature babies are especially vulnerable to infection. "But she'll recover?" Emma asked, her voice barely a whisper, afraid to hope. "With time and careful monitoring, yes. The good news is that there doesn't appear to be any permanent damage to the stomach port or her digestive system. The internal injuries should heal." "But Emma, Marcus," the doctor's expression became even more serious, "your daughter is extremely lucky. If that tube had been pulled at a slightly different angle, it could have caused catastrophic damage. She could have suffered a perforated esophagus, severe internal bleeding, or aspiration that could have been fatal." Emma's legs gave out completely, and Marcus had to hold her up, his own body shaking with the weight of what could have been, with how close they came to losing their precious baby girl. "Can we see her?" Marcus asked, his voice breaking, desperate to hold his daughter. "Yes, but she's heavily sedated right now. The trauma caused her significant distress, her cortisol levels were dangerously elevated, and we felt it was best to let her rest while we performed the tube replacement and repair. We also wanted to spare her additional pain." They followed the doctor down a hallway that seemed to stretch forever, past other rooms where they could hear other children crying, other parents suffering, other families fighting their own battles. Finally, they reached a private room where Lily lay in a hospital crib, her tiny body dwarfed by medical equipment, a fresh bandage covering half her face, new tubes carefully taped in place, monitors beeping steadily, recording every breath, every heartbeat. Emma's legs gave out again, and this time Marcus couldn't hold her. They both sank to the floor beside the crib, gripping each other, staring at their daughter, back in a hospital bed, back under monitors, back where they'd fought so desperately to escape from just weeks ago. "I should have protected her," Emma wept, her whole body shaking with guilt and trauma. "I should have left when that woman first approached. I should have called security. I should have run. I should have." "No," Marcus said firmly, pulling her face toward his, forcing her to meet his eyes. His own eyes were red and swollen with tears. "You did nothing wrong. You were defending our daughter's right to exist. That monster did this. That evil woman did this. Not you. Never you. You're the best mother Lily could ever have. You protected her as best you could. That woman attacked her. You couldn't have stopped it. But I let someone hurt her. You couldn't have stopped her. Emma, listen to me," Marcus gripped her shoulders. You couldn't have stopped her. She attacked our baby. She attacked an infant. That's not on you. That's on her. That's on her evil, twisted soul. You did everything right. You stood up for Lily's rights. You refused to be bullied. You're a hero. A police officer appeared in the doorway. Mr. and Mrs. Martinez. I'm Detective Sarah Chen. I'm leading the investigation into the assault on your daughter. I'd like to get your full statements when you're ready. Over the next hour, as Lily slept peacefully under sedation, they recounted everything for the detective. Emma described every word of Linda's harassment, her increasingly aggressive behavior, the assault itself. Marcus added details about Lily's medical condition, her fragility, making sure the detective understood just how dangerous Linda's actions had been. Detective Chen's expression grew harder with each detail, her pen moving rapidly across her notepad, her jaw clenching with suppressed anger. We have multiple witnesses and clear video footage from 3 different angles, Detective Chen said. This is a clear-cut case of assault on a minor and child endangerment. Given your daughter's medical fragility and the fact that Ms. Whitmore was specifically told the device was life-sustaining medical equipment, we're adding charges of aggravated assault and assault with intent to cause serious bodily harm. The DA is also considering charges of assault with a deadly weapon, using her hands as weapons against an infant. What will happen to her? Emma asked, her voice hollow with exhaustion and trauma. She's been booked into county jail. Her arraignment is tomorrow morning. Given the severity of the charges, the video evidence, and the victim's age and medical condition, I expect the DA will push for significant jail time. We're also looking into her position with the HOA. We've already received over 40 calls from residents reporting previous harassment incidents. Some going back years. This woman has been terrorizing your neighborhood, and nobody stopped her until now. I want her to pay, Marcus said, his voice hard as steel, filled with a father's righteous fury. I want her to face everything she deserves. She could have killed our daughter. She attacked a baby. A defenseless, medically fragile baby. We're going to make sure justice is served, Detective Chen promised, her expression determined. I have a daughter myself. What this woman did, she shook her head. I've been a detective for 15 years, and this is one of the most clear-cut cases of cruelty I've ever seen. Over the next 3 days, as Lily recovered in the hospital, as tubes were adjusted and medication was administered and parents took turns sitting vigil by her bedside, afraid to close their eyes, the story exploded across social media like a wildfire. The grandmother's video had been shared to Facebook, then Twitter, then TikTok, then Instagram. Within 24 hours, it had been viewed 10 million times. Within 48 hours, 20 million. Within 72 hours, it had been viewed over 50 million times worldwide, spreading across continents, sparking outrage in every corner of the internet. The comments section was unified in their outrage, thousands upon thousands of messages pouring in. That poor baby screaming. I'm crying watching this. I can't stop crying. 15 years minimum. That woman is a monster. She deserves to rot in prison. Imagine attacking a sick infant because you don't like how she looks. What is wrong with people? My heart is breaking for that mother. The terror in her voice when she screams, "What have you done?" I felt that in my soul. That baby fought to survive in the NICU and this Karen tried to kill her. Lock her up. I have a premature baby too and this is my worst nightmare. That poor family. The way the baby cries, that's a pain cry. That's agony. I hope that woman hears those screams for the rest of her life. Local news picked up the story first, running segments showing the video, with Lily's face blurred to protect her privacy, interviewing witnesses, showing footage of Linda being led away in handcuffs. Then regional news covered it. Then national news. Within 3 days, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and every major network was covering the story. It became the top trending topic on Twitter for 2 days straight. The headline, HOA Karen breaks premature baby's feeding tube, arrested immediately, dominated every media outlet. News anchors cried on camera watching the video. Legal experts came on to discuss potential sentences, with most agreeing that Linda faced serious prison time. Child development specialists talked about the trauma such an incident could cause to both the infant and the mother. Medical professionals explained feeding tubes and why they were life-sustaining, educating millions of people about medically complex children. Emma and Marcus gave one interview, carefully arranged through the hospital's media relations department, sitting beside Lily's hospital crib while their daughter slept peacefully, finally stable, her vitals strong. The interviewer, a mother herself, had tears streaming down her face before the interview even began, having watched the video dozens of times in preparation. Emma, Marcus, thank you for speaking with us during this incredibly difficult time, she said, her voice gentle and full of compassion. How is Lily doing? She's stable, Marcus said, reaching into the crib to hold Lily's tiny hand, his thumb stroking her soft skin. The doctors say she's going to recover physically. But the trauma, his voice broke. We don't know yet what psychological impact this will have. She's 3 months old. She shouldn't have had to experience that kind of pain, that kind of violence. No child should. Can you tell us what happened that day? The interviewer asked. Emma took a shaky breath and recounted the story once more, her voice breaking multiple times, tears flowing freely down her face. The interviewer cried with her, her professional composure breaking. By the end, both women were sobbing, and even the camera operators were wiping their eyes. We just want people to understand, Emma said, wiping her eyes, looking directly into the camera, speaking to millions of viewers. Children with medical needs have the same right to exist in public spaces as any other child. My daughter is not disturbing. She's not inappropriate. She's not unsightly. She's a miracle. She fought for 63 days in the NICU. She survived surgeries. She overcame so much. She's a fighter. She's beautiful. And what happened to her could happen to any family with a medically complex child. This kind of discrimination, this kind of cruelty, it has to stop. It has to end now. The interviewer composed herself enough to ask, what do you want to see happen to Linda Whitmore? Marcus spoke this time, his voice hard and cold, filled with a father's protective rage. I want her to face the absolute full consequences of her actions under the law. She didn't just break a tube, she endangered my daughter's life. She traumatized a 3-month-old baby who had already suffered more than most people suffer in a lifetime. She assaulted an infant. I want justice. I want her to spend years in prison thinking about what she did, about those screams, about the blood on that baby's face. I want her to understand that children like Lily have value, have rights, have dignity. And I want other people who might think like her to see what happens when you hurt innocent children. I want this to be a warning. The interview aired that evening during prime time and was viewed by 18 million people in its initial broadcast. It was shared millions more times online, becoming one of the most watched news segments of the year. The response was overwhelming and immediate. The community rallied around the Martinez family in ways they never expected. A GoFundMe was set up by a neighbor to help cover medical costs and raised over $400,000 in just 3 days. Letters and cards poured in from around the world, from Australia, from Japan, from Europe, from South America. Other families with medically complex children shared their own stories of discrimination and harassment on social media, using the hashtag #LiliesLaw, calling for legislation to protect people with visible medical devices from discrimination. The Riverside Meadows HOA held an emergency meeting the day after the interview aired. Every single resident showed up, over 300 people crammed into a meeting room designed for 50. The fire marshal had to be called. People stood in hallways, listened from outside through open windows. The board voted unanimously to remove Linda Whitmore from her position immediately and permanently. They issued a lengthy public apology to the Martinez family, acknowledging their failure to act on previous complaints. They announced new anti-discrimination policies, mandatory sensitivity training for all board members, and established a committee to review all previous complaints against Linda that had been ignored or dismissed over the years. "We failed the Martinez family," the new acting president said, his voice heavy with shame and regret. "We failed to see the warning signs. We failed to act on previous complaints. We failed to protect a vulnerable infant and her family from a bully in a position of power. We are deeply, profoundly sorry. We vow to do better. We vow to make sure this never happens again in our community." 3 weeks after the incident, Linda Whitmore stood before Judge Patricia Morrison for her arraignment. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity, with people standing in the aisles, sitting on the floor, crowding the hallway outside, spilling out onto the courthouse steps. Supporters of the Martinez family filled every available space. Parents of medically complex children had driven from neighboring states. People who had been victims of Linda's harassment over the years finally felt brave enough to come forward, to be seen, to demand justice. Security had to be increased because of the crowds and the palpable anger in the air. People shouted as Linda was led in, her hands cuffed behind her back, wearing an orange jumpsuit that seemed to have aged her years. Her expensive tennis outfit was gone, her perfect hair disheveled, her arrogant expression replaced with fear. "Justice for Lily," someone shouted from the gallery. "Baby abuser," another voice called out, filled with rage. "Lock her up," others chanted. The judge banged her gavel repeatedly. "Order. I will have order in this courtroom or I will clear it." The prosecutor, District Attorney James Mitchell, a father of 3 himself, presented the evidence with barely contained fury. He showed the video on the large courtroom screen. The entire courtroom gasped and many people cried openly as they watched the assault unfold in horrifying detail, heard baby Lily's screams of agony, saw the blood flowing down her tiny face. He presented medical reports detailing Lily's injuries, her hospital stay, the trauma, the potential for death. He presented character witnesses. 15 people testified about Linda's pattern of abusive behavior over the years, painting a picture of a cruel tyrant who had terrorized an entire neighborhood. A mother testified through tears that Linda had made her autistic son cry by calling him disruptive and abnormal and demanding he be removed from the park and never return. An elderly man testified with shaking hands that Linda had threatened to have his wife's wheelchair ramp removed because it didn't match the aesthetic standards and was an eyesore. A teenager testified that Linda had called the police on him multiple times for playing basketball in his own driveway, claiming the noise was disturbing the peace and lowering property values. The testimony went on for hours, witness after witness, building an undeniable pattern of cruelty. Linda's lawyer, a nervous young public defender who clearly didn't want this case, tried weakly to argue for leniency. "Your Honor, Ms. Whitmore is a first-time offender, a respected member of her community." "Respected?" Judge Morrison interrupted, her voice sharp enough to cut glass, her expression one of barely controlled rage. "I've been listening to testimony all day about how this woman has terrorized her neighborhood for over a decade. I've read dozens of complaints. Harassment, intimidation, abuse of power, targeting people with disabilities, targeting children, targeting the vulnerable. The only reason she wasn't charged before is that her victims were too afraid or thought no one would care. This time, she went too far. This time, she assaulted an infant in front of witnesses. This time, there's video evidence that the whole world has seen." The judge looked directly at Linda. "Ms. Whitmore, I've been on the bench for 25 years, and I have never seen such a clear case of cruelty and reckless endangerment. You targeted a 3-month-old infant. You were told repeatedly that the device was keeping this child alive. And you didn't care. You ripped it out anyway. Your actions caused serious injury and could have caused death." Linda opened her mouth to speak, but the judge held up her hand. "I don't want to hear it. I've read your statement. The video proves you're a liar. I'm denying bail. You will remain in custody until trial. And I'm instructing the prosecution to pursue maximum sentencing." Applause erupted through the courtroom. This time, the judge let it continue for a full minute before gaveling for order. Linda was led away, her face crumbling, finally understanding that her actions had real consequences. 6 months later came the trial. It lasted 5 days and was broadcast live. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. At sentencing, Emma and Marcus brought Lily. She was now 9 months old, healthy, thriving. The feeding tube was gone, she'd transitioned to normal eating 2 months ahead of schedule, a testament to her remarkable strength and resilience. Judge Morrison looked at the healthy baby, then at the broken woman who had tried to destroy her. Ms. Whitmore, you have been found guilty of aggravated assault and battery of a minor, child endangerment, and destruction of medical equipment. Before I impose sentence, I want you to look at that baby. Linda's eyes reluctantly went to Lily, who was playing with a toy, babbling happily, full of life and joy. That baby is alive and thriving despite your best efforts to harm her. She survived you. That's who you assaulted. That innocent child. The judge's voice hardened. I sentence you to 13 years in state prison. You'll serve at least 11 years before parole consideration. Additionally, you'll be on probation for 5 years after release, prohibited from any HOA position, and required to perform 1,000 hours of community service with medically fragile children. Linda sobbed. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Emma stood, holding Lily. She looked Linda in the eyes. Your apology means nothing. You're only sorry because you're going to prison. But my daughter is thriving. She's alive despite you. And what happened to her will protect other families. That's your legacy, forcing change through your cruelty. Linda was led away in handcuffs for the last time. 1 year after the incident, Emma sat in the park, now renamed Lily's Park. Lily, 15 months old, was toddling around chasing butterflies, completely healthy, the feeding tube a distant memory. Other families with medically complex children gathered there now. It had become a safe space, a community of acceptance and love. A woman approached. You're Emma Martinez. My daughter was born at 24 weeks. Thank you. After you spoke out, everything changed. You saved so many families from what you went through. Marcus appeared with ice cream. Lily squealed with delight. Dada. Ice. Emma watched her daughter play, healthy and happy, surrounded by love and acceptance. Linda Whitmore sat in a prison cell, her power gone, serving her sentence. Justice had been served. Love had won. And Lily thrived, living proof that cruelty cannot extinguish the light of innocence. As the sun set, Emma held her daughter close. You changed the world, baby girl. And Lily smiled and said, Love you, Mama. It was everything.